Tourette's podcast is not a medical advice show. It's a show about experiences. In the course of that, we may talk about medications or therapies or stories from the doctor's office, but don't mistake any of that for medical advice or direction. It's not. Get that only from people or places licensed or certified to give it, not from a massively fun and action-packed podcast about our life experiences, such as.
And one of the boys in my class was like, "Why are you doing like that?" And I was like what? And he did it with his eyebrow. And I was like, oh my gosh. I was like, you know what, guys? I'm so glad one of you finally asked, because I've been dying to tell you guys. And I told them, and it was like nothing really new to them. I remember they were like, oh, okay. And I was just like, oh, that's really refreshing, you know? It was like, I felt like they at first hired me to kind of give them a safe place, but I felt like it was like it ended up being the reverse. They felt very safe place for me.
This is Tourette's podcast, made possible with support of the Tourette Association of America and part of the Geeks Rising Network. Hey everybody, it's Ben. Tuxedo time, because this is the season 6 finale episode. And it ends more perfectly than I could plan for myself, with our guest, who I'll get to in a minute. Remember the voice memo we played last week from Ivan, the parent who was looking for good, maybe tried and true ways of informing his young son for the first time that his son, had been diagnosed with Tourette Syndrome? Like, how do you tell somebody that for the first time? How do you convey it without psyching out the whole situation or creating difficulty and so on? So we played his question last week, and a lot of you weighed in and gave really sincere advice. A lot of parents told their stories of, telling their young child about the diagnosis and what it means. Here's the update.
Hi, this is Ivan, just calling up for a little update. I just listened to your podcast today, in which you passed my reply, my question. I'd like to thank you for your emails you sent back. I took them all. I read them all. I took everything I heard into consideration. For a quick update, in between the time the podcast aired and my question, we decided to go ahead and talk to my son about what was going on. And to our great surprise, even though he's only 8 years old, he said, now I understand. And a lot of things in his mind made sense all of a sudden. And we still have lots of work to do, and so does he. But we did, no later than this morning, we sat down with the school, by internet, of course, with this COVID. And we talked, and I explained to them what is Tourette and how it affects and what are the comorbidities that my son does have. And we went through them all. We did listen to what he asked. He said only his teacher and his principal were to know for now. He's not ready to tell everybody. So we respected that. But we're getting through it. And to our great surprise, the one who's taken it the best is him. So thanks for all your inputs. I am really happy that everybody took time to answer my questions, and I'll keep listening to you guys. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Ivan. Thanks to everybody for pulling together on that, on the podcast and in the Tourette's podcast discussion group on Facebook, where we have some new members to thank. Don, Molly, Jocelyn, Andrew, Chris. I hope I'm not leaving anybody out. Sophia has been our admin since day one at the discussion group, and I always thank her for being there. Tell her thank you if you get a chance. And please join the group if you haven't already. Answer those admission questions. You have to do that to get in. It's a closed group you request to join. You're presented with 3 questions, very easy questions. Answer them, and Sophia will give you the welcome. One question I just put into the group that you can reply to there. I have a parent here asking for books about Tourette Syndrome that are meant for young children to read. Like, a parent sent me an email saying, what are some books about Tourette Syndrome that young kids can read, like younger than 10 years old? So I have that question up there in the discussion group right now. Let me know, comment there, or you can email me directly, tourettespodcast@gmail.com. And I'll put a list together for this parent and anybody else who wants to see it. I can put that up at tourettespodcast.com when it's ready. A reading list for little kids, books about Tourette Syndrome. We did hear from Riani Patel. She's an author. We talked to her a little bit earlier on this season. She's written young adult books about Tourette and being different, kind of processing that. That was episode 7 of this season. And okay, as I speak, just got a reply to that question about books for kids about Tourette. This is from Stacy, who says, Richard Paul Evans writes a series about a boy with Tourette called Michael Vey. More of a superhero book. His Tourette's is his superpower. Cool, so that one's on the list. I like lists. I like making lists. Like my all-time favorite radio show, which streams online these days, it's called The Best Show with Tom Sharpling. That's the host. He'll have these like 3-hour-long shows where he'll have a topic like recently it was the greatest crab apples of all time, like sort of people who fit that description, or the greatest moments in rock and roll history. And it's always done in kind of like a sarcastic way. But anyway, people call in and suggest things for the list, whatever topic it is. I kind of want to steal that. Like, let's come up with some lists that we can make. Maybe do that for season 7, like weirdest tics, or one I thought about recently with my friend Haley. We were talking about like songs or scenes in movies that are sort of like a visual or audio analogy for what Tourette feels like in your brain. Like, is there like a chaotic scene or just something that kind of communicates it, but has nothing to do with Tourette? It's just something you see and you're like, God, I relate to that. Anyway, we'll flesh this out. First, let's make this list of books about Tourette Syndrome for different age groups. And we'll start it off with the books by Riani Patel. Okay, speaking of lists, here's one. Adam, Michael, Jamie, Dan, Gianna, Danny Jack, Riani, Zach, aka The Tickin' Time Bomb, Ben, Christina, Jules, Shikar, Kylie, the kid, and her mom Sparkle, Becky, and Eli. That's everybody, I think that's everybody who's been on the season 6 of Tourette's podcast so far. People with Tourette or parents of people who have Tourette or Tourette's, whatever you want to say. So grateful. Thanks to everybody who's been on the podcast this season and everyone who's listened. The podcast keeps growing, new listeners all the time. And it's great that they're finding the podcast organically, like just Googling to see if something like this exists. And, okay. Just got 2 more submissions for the list of books for kids. Christine recommends the book Taking Tourette Syndrome to School. And Karen recommends a book called I Can't Stop, a story about Tourette Syndrome. Nice, okay, going on the list. Anyway, back to the list of people who've been on the podcast this season. Update on Zach Rice, the Tickin' Time Bomb, pro boxer with Tourette Syndrome. I caught up with him recently, and he's got a big boxing match coming up. If you caught his episode this season, he was supposed to have a fight in the Dominican Republic. And of course, COVID has changed everything, but that match is rescheduled ahead. I think for this month. Zach was such a pleasure to talk to. And remember, he's out to be the first boxing champ with Tourette Syndrome. The Tickin' Time Bomb, such a perfect name. And one more person to add to that list, and that's our guest this week, Calvin. Calvin Ramirez. I cannot wait for you to hear this conversation. First, have to say, for people who live in the US, this is big, this is important. Go to Tourette.org, the website of the Tourette Association of America, the primary sponsor of Tourette's podcast. Go to Tourette.org and click Attend an Event, and sign up for the Virtual Day of Advocacy. That's March 3rd. You'll see a list of policy priorities we need to tell our members of Congress about. So what's the National Virtual Day of Advocacy, you ask? Well, members of the community unite virtually to advocate for the most pressing issues facing the Tourette syndrome and tic disorder community. Your involvement is crucial to furthering much-needed funding and attention to this already misunderstood disorder. The folks in Congress don't know about issues if we don't tell them. So this year, there's a unique opportunity for all of us to join as the Day of Advocacy has gone virtual. Wherever you are in the country, this is your opportunity to make a difference by meeting with your local representatives and senators to help them better understand successes, trials, and tribulations of the condition. Congressional support will not only improve your life, but also the lives of the other 1 million Americans living with Tourette syndrome or another kind of tic disorder, and the 50% of those people who have yet to receive a diagnosis. I'll be a speaker at events surrounding this effort. Please sign up for it. There are some very specific things we need to press Congress about, and there's no better way to convey that than having it come from the people with lived experience. My mom testified before Congress when I was a kid about Tourette and insurance, and that made a difference. Your story is true and real, or trill, if people still say that. Go to Tourette.org and register now. The big day is March 3rd, but there's some prep work to do ahead of it. So please join me there, virtually, the National Day of Advocacy. And for Tourette groups in other countries, let me know what you would like me to let the community know about in Season 7, because people all over the world listen to this, where we're telling real-life stories that we don't have to sensationalize or dramatize in any way. Which brings us to our amazing closeout guest this week, Calvin Ramirez. There's so much wide open, like open heart surgery type of conversation. You know, like two strangers really getting to know one another's high points and vulnerabilities pretty quickly. And we get into like fate in a certain kind of way. I don't know if you're familiar with the conversation about like free will versus determinism. I'm not going to go into that here. It's interesting reading if you want to look that up. But basically, how much of our life do we get to decide for ourselves? And how much of it unfolds with few other options in front of us, based on what just happened previously? Despite all the intention we can put into living the way we want and being what we want to be, sometimes being what we want to be is the realization that we're in the best position with the life we have. And I think that's pretty freeing. Like, I don't see that as frustrating. I'm not worried about being a millionaire. I've got things going on that I'm totally happy with. In the case of our guest here, Calvin, he's working in the space of special education. And based on what he says here, it's almost like he had to be in that kind of work. Like it was there for him. And I don't mean that in any sort of like spiritual predestination fate kind of way. Like one thing leads to another. Each step we take is pretty much in the direction of the step we took right before that. And how did we get on that path to begin with? Like what about ourselves made it appropriate and right that we got on that path to be where we are right now? I'm sort of, in saying that, I'm kind of paraphrasing something I heard a while back. And I just tried to Google it so I can credit the right person unsuccessfully because I don't remember the exact quote, but I think it might have been Carl Sagan or Richard Dawkins. Doesn't matter. I mean, it does. Credit to whoever put that in my brain. Anyway, this is not to say that Calvin is at his ultimate destination, and not to say that I am or you are either. I think it's exciting to think about how the strongest skill that we have in life, whatever it is, whatever your skill is probably not something that we studied hard to learn. We can discipline it and get better at it, but it's probably something that we're naturally good at. And Calvin's natural strength, and what he finds a lot of peace and joy within, seems to stem straight from his experiences with Tourette Syndrome. And I hope that doesn't sound like a disregarding oversimplification of who he is based on a 1-hour conversation I had with him. But just listen to him. I'll point out that even though he hasn't had the easiest ride in life, and I don't know who among us has, but he's been through all the hard stuff that so many of us can relate to, Tourette community or otherwise. But I'll point out that he also had love and support from friends, and I think most importantly from family. A big thank you to the parents who were listening and are learning things for the sake of their children who have Tourette or Tourette's. Again, I don't care how you say it. And if that support hasn't been there, like in your life, and you're really feeling that, the scraping effects from tough experiences, I'll reference Danny Jack from earlier this season. Danny Jack has been through it, but has a way to be stoked on life and insists that whoever you are, where you are right now isn't the end of your story. There's so much that can happen, and you have so many naturally carved things within you that will essentially see to it. And I love that I can say all this and not feel like some hack motivational speaker, because the community here, and that includes people with Tourette and people who don't have it, that is. The community is so resilient and so able to help you get through your individual situation if you choose to reach out. So here it is, talking with a perfect guest to end the season, Calvin Ramirez. I think we are good to go now. And you know what? It might be cool just to go ahead and just kind of jump into it, and we can just kind of let it unfold, because I like to kind of keep it organic, and not know too much in advance, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I'm so down for that. I'm down to dive in.
Cool. So, I guess just to get us started, could you tell us what your name is and the general part of the world you come from, and what you do, or just how you would introduce yourself to this audience?
Yes. Well, my name is Calvin Ramirez. I'm from Covina, California, which is around maybe 25, 30 minutes from Los Angeles area. Um, and yeah, right now I'm going to school at University of Laverne to teach special education, life's going pretty good right now. I mean, there's pandemic life, but as good as it can be in terms of having a pandemic. Yeah.
Nice. How long have you known that you wanted to go into special education?
It was actually a very recent discovery. I didn't know what I wanted to do for a very long time. I had graduated from my undergrad and worked at and my undergrad was in English, creative writing, and I ended up working at Best Buy for like maybe 3 years, and it was awesome. I love electronics, but it definitely wasn't what I had graduated for.
Yeah.
But I was still at a very, very much of a loss at what I wanted to do and where I wanted my life to go until I got an instructional aid job at in the district that locally right by where I live. And my mom's worked in that district for so long, so I decided to give it a chance, and I love what she does, so I did it too. And I really, really fell in love with all those kids and their different quirks and things about them, because having my tics growing up, I felt like that was something that kind of I guess could at times isolate me. And when working with these kids, each of them kind of had their own struggles and journeys with their difference, and I felt like it was just so warm. I just wanted to keep it going. I didn't want it to stop. So
nice. So, I mean, this is something I've said on the podcast, and people who've been listening for a long time they know exactly what I'm about to say. But it's like, having Tourette is gives you an edge when it comes to empathy and putting yourself in another person's position and seeing what it is they might need. And that's such a, and people use the word superpower a lot. I mean, if I feel like there's anything that does come from having Tourette, it's kind of that. It's that sense of empathy coming from a place where you can give someone else their room to breathe and kind of develop in their own way. And I mean, that's a really cool thing that you're going into.
Totally. I 100% agree with all of that, and the superpower and all, the whole empathy thing. At first, I didn't realize it, but once, working with them, I realized that me having Tourette was the thing that connected me most strongly to them. And I was so grateful for it.
Nice. Yeah. And that sense of variety too, because with having something like this, there's a lot of, I guess, surprise, and it's difficult to predict, what, because Tourette is just, it's one of these wild cards to where you don't know what kind of shape your tics are going to take. And you don't know if it's the kind of thing where, sometimes they say it wears off when you get older, that it's just a childhood disorder and it wears off when you get older, which we know is not, that's just kind of like a narrative. But, you could have it into your adulthood like I do. You're in a mode of life where life can throw you things that you don't expect, but you still have a sense of comfort and self-acceptance that can get you to a place where it's not quite so bad. Have you been kind of open about having Tourette, or is this something, sometimes we hear people bottle it up for the shame of it and they don't want to be misunderstood. They don't want people to know about this.
I feel that's a good one. I actually would say there was never really a time in my life where I tried to bottle it up. I think, and I don't know if it was on purpose or not, but I just knew that there was something going on. And then once I had actually finally figured out that it was Tourette, I remember it having a name to it. And I was finally like, okay, that's that weirdness, that ambiguity of what was going on is finally clarified. And I feel, for some reason, it may sound weird, but I guess I liked it a little bit, because I feel like the people that I ended up befriending, knowing about this and knowing about my tics and being really, really respectful about them, I felt like it was so easy for me to pick really, really good friends and to surround myself with good people. And I mean, I guess in certain places where maybe parties or or really, really public settings, I'll try to really quiet it down. But I think in terms of how I go about my life, I feel like I do let them run freely, and I like that whoever's left over after seeing them all run freely tends to be the better of the bunch.
That's interesting that having something like Tourette can also kind of simplify life for you, because it gets a lot of the stuff out of the way in terms of, okay, this person has a ridiculous way of regarding me. They don't seem like a friend. This person seems a lot more genuine.
Yeah.
It's, it's like it sweeps the floor a lot more quickly to build the, I guess, kind of like the infrastructure in your life and what you need. And I mean, so have there been a lot of experiences that were negative when it came to, just how people regarded you, or in school, or having to explain yourself? I mean, has that happened a lot?
I'm sure it did, but now in my adulthood, I remember, yes, but there's two specific instances that I remember from my young adulthood. There was one in high school when I remember being at the movie theater, and I was with my friends, and at that time I was on a cheerleading team, and those girls were so awesome that totally made me fall in love with just the nurturingness of women. They're just so accepting. But I remember I went with a few of the girls from the cheer team, and we were sitting in the rows, and I don't remember, I think it was the previews or whatever the case be, but I was ticking, and then somebody behind me was throwing either popcorn or M&Ms or something at me, and I felt like, I think it was every time I was ticking, I felt something being thrown. And I don't really remember what happened after that, but I remember my friend that I was with, her name was Lauren. She comforted me at the time. And I remember not feeling, I think the reason I remember it is because she was comforting me. And I think that really was just like, oh, well, thanks. This bad stuff can happen, but if I have someone here with me, it doesn't feel so, I guess, embarrassing, And then I remember the second time being, I had it in my head. What was it? Oh yes, it was some sort of science class, I remember. And there was this kid that every time I would tick, he would do it. And then that would make me do it again. And then he would do it. And he was just that type of jokester kid that did stuff like that. But it was very triggering for me. And then I remember I said something to him at one point, and I was like, why do you keep doing that? And he said something like, why don't you stop? And I was like, I can't stop. And then I can't remember where the conversation went after that, but I remember it being hostile, and I remember not being able to stand my ground as much as I wanted to. And I don't think I had any close friends in that class, so maybe I didn't feel as supported, but I don't remember feeling victorious after that situation. Yeah.
Yeah. It's amazing the lessons that you learn early on when it comes to self-preservation. And I think also just kind of being self-conscious and recognizing who you are, and I guess the big open end of where you fit in the world. It kind of forces you to reckon with that really quickly. And I was talking to somebody else about this. I hope I phrase this the right way, or I say this the right way. I'm just going to try to sound it out, but it's almost like if you have something like Tourette, because it teaches you to be kind of self-conscious at a young age. Sometimes I see, I guess I've thought this since I was a kid, one way or another, in observing adults who I think haven't been in that position of having to evaluate themselves, because everything's been kind of quote unquote normal. And people use words like neurotypical and all that. I mean, people who haven't necessarily been sort of put on social trial seem to kind of lack a certain level of self-awareness. And this is where I have to be, I don't want to sound like I'm like insulting anybody or saying that, people with Tourette are better than other people or anything like that, because that's not what I'm saying. But you do, I think, develop through that self-consciousness, you do kind of develop a way of maybe kind of guarding yourself. And sometimes you can recognize in other people where it's like, wow, I can't believe what this person just said aloud. Like something like that, when they would be thinking that about us, of like, this guy's ticking, this is weird. It just, I think how forceful and unabashed some people can be when it comes to picking on people who are different. I kind of see it the other way, is that I can't believe that they're actually picking on this person openly. It's just, it's kind of this weird inverse thing of saying maybe there is something good about reckoning with all that at a young age and being able to, I think, arrive at that sense of empathy and being a good person for other people. And if you're in a situation where someone else may have like a serious sense of self-consciousness around you, you're going to be a great ally to them because you let them breathe.
I 100% agree with that. 100%. Especially in, before I was diagnosed with the Tourette and before I was dealing with all that, when I was younger, I remember when I was diagnosed and the experiences that came with that, I started to reflect on how I guess I approached people as a kid. And I remember, I don't remember being a bully whatsoever. But I do remember having that sense of obliviousness about things and kind of just, saying whatever floats in my mind and then without any real harmful intent. But I think it was real when I actually started taking and started having experiences. I really started paying attention to just the little things I was saying and being like, wow, some things just don't come out the right way, and especially, my nephew, he just got diagnosed and he's 9 now, but I want to say he was diagnosed when he was maybe 7, turning 8. It was fairly recent.
With Tourette?
But he, with Tourette as well. And that's also what really kind of pushed me to want to really explore the Tourette community a lot more with him. But having Tourette he's always been a sweet boy, but it's just his resilience. I remember I saw him playing PlayStation with his friends, and he's really big on bullying right now, like battling bullying, figuring out how to deal with it. And he's so young. And I remember hearing him say to one of his friends, like, he said something like, okay, if somebody says something about you, I'm going to back you up and I'm going to say this. And if somebody says something about me, you got my back. And it was very organized. And I was just thinking, I was like, I really feel like having Tourette and him dealing with some things and dealing with bullying at possibly, a little bit more of an alarming rate, may have sparked this, like you said, this awareness, this empathy in him that just kind of makes him seem really wise,
Yeah. When you said the word resiliency, recently the Tourette Association had the Teen Summit, which was like this virtual, this online thing. I spoke at it, but there are also some professionals who spoke at it, doctors. And one of the sessions with Dr. Ken Phelps was on resiliency. And it was kind of that exactly. It's like, you can kind of log this experience and get a frame of reference from it, from having gone through something that's not comfortable. And maybe it's the kind of thing where you didn't necessarily choose to go through this experience. It's whether it's bullying or something that, like, decisions other people have made for you, where they're like, okay, I'm going to make this really hard for you. I'm going to drag you through this. You get that frame of reference. I'm not saying it's a good thing that happened, but the resiliency that you develop by going through these challenges in life is really something to talk about, because it gives you all kinds of perspective. You learn a lot from it. Again, I'm not saying like it's worth it to go through all these things that, horrible things that people can do to each other. But the resiliency that you develop is something that I think is with you for life. The challenge is, what decisions do you make with it? Because I do remember when I was a kid and I was bullied by certain groups of people, I remember kind of thinking, when's it my turn to be the bully or to be like the master of the situation, and, looking for people to pick on, essentially. When I was like 9 or 10 years old or something, you kind of have that decision to make of which way am I going to go with it? And sometimes it's just, as you mature, your mind kind of just puts you on the right track. I don't know. I haven't heard too much talk in the Tourette community about bullies who have Tourette, who, they've had such a negative experience that they channel that negative experience negatively to other people. It's mostly people who seem to kind of do a better job owning their situation and just really cultivating a powerful sense of self it's a powerful thing to have gone through this and develop that resiliency, so you can make these good decisions about what it is to be a human being. Which, I mean, it sounds like that's kind of the road it took you down to want to help other people and want to be an educator. And, you know, you've gone through these experiences to where you've kind of logged kind of certain life lessons that you can't really learn in school, as far as like, you know, the teacher teaches you how to get through this. You might get like life advice here and there, but, you know, you really kind of learned the difficult way. And it puts you in a position to be able to help other people. A very powerful thing, I feel like. And I just think it's awesome that you're channeling it that way, specifically through education.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. You know, before, when I was in my undergrad, I remember people kept telling me, they're like, oh, what's your major? I was like, oh, it's English. And they were like, you want to be a teacher? I was like, no, but you know, I like, I don't know, I like writing. I like creative writing. And I remember I finished it up, and for years I was like, I don't think I want to be a teacher. I mean, it sounds cool. I mean, my mom's worked in the school district forever, but I remember it wasn't until I was actually in the classroom and sat with the kids and just little things about them. And I remember one specifically, and they didn't notice my tics for the longest, because now in my adulthood, they've taken on a more subtle form, but still very much there. And they very much make their appearance during certain points in my life that are a little bit more triggering. But I remember I was sitting down, and I have a specific eyebrow one that I do frequently. And one of the boys in my class was like, why are you doing like that? And I was like what? And he did it with his eyebrow. And I was like, oh my gosh. I was like, you know what, guys? I'm so glad one of you finally asked, because I've been dying to tell you guys. And I told them, and it was like nothing really new to them. I remember they were like, oh, okay. And I was just like, oh, that's really refreshing.
Yeah.
You know, it was like, I felt like they at first hired me to kind of give them a safe place, but I felt like it was like, it ended up being the reverse. They felt very safe place for me.
Yeah.
You know, so it ended up being a dream job for sure. And I'm like, you know, when I decided to go back to school to pursue it, I was like, it was a very 100% decision. And I'm very back and forth on things. I'm like, should I do this? Should I do that? I remember at one point I wanted to go to art school, which was really, really interesting. But, this was the first time when I was like, okay, I'm so down for this feeling and this act of, I don't know, being around these kids, these cool kids.
It's interesting because your life is pretty similar to mine in a lot of ways, because I thought I was going to be an artist. I was going to go to art school and everything. And I think when I saw, I guess, how expensive art school was going to be,
oh yeah,
I kind of pulled away from it. And I was I guess, kind of asking myself questions of, am I going to be able to support myself on this? You know, should I keep art as a hobby and maybe pursue something else? But where I landed in college was an English degree, because I didn't really know where else to go. I knew I wanted to be, I think, some kind of communicator of some way. But when I declared my major, I really had no idea why specifically I was choosing English. I like to write. But I think it's kind of because of, and maybe I just haven't thought about this till now, and I hope I'm not manufacturing intentions for myself, but it's like, I think it is because I kind of wanted to tell stories, so to speak, or listen to other people's experiences and write about them. I didn't know that I was going to go into journalism, which is what I eventually went into for newspapers. And that's another job where I feel like, you know, empathy is important. Like, you got to be objective, but we're not robots. We're people. You know, you have to have some tact, and you have to, you know, I mean, obviously not all reporters do, but you have to be in a position where you can listen to people tell their story and have some, you know, sense of sincerity, especially if it's a difficult story to tell, something that's really emotional for the person you're talking to. And if I'm interviewing someone, I didn't want to be, you know, a soulless person on the other end. I wanted to kind of like show some humanity at the same time, so they could feel, I guess, trustworthy listening to me. I just feel kind of like wrapping it all up, you know, is not this interview, but just the point I'm trying to make is that I kind of feel like, not knowing what I wanted to do, my life kind of chose it for me based on these experiences and things that I couldn't control in my life. And what did I want to do about it? And where did I want to be? I wanted to be a communicator. I wanted to tell stories. I wanted to get out there. I wanted to meet people. I wanted to, you know, I'm a learning junkie too, but I think it's mainly just, I want to hear people's stories and get those connections. And so English, I guess, was just sort of like my brain automatically saying like, this is where you fit the most. This is where you're the most comfortable. I've never really talked through that or thought about it that way until just now when you said that, you know, you went from art to English to, you know, working with people. And if you think about journalism and storytelling and all that, it's not really all that different in terms of the effect and kind of where your mind is and the intention that you have to bring to it to be successful with it and be a human being with it. It's kind of interesting.
That is totally interesting. And I really like that you mentioned that because getting into English, it's such a, I remember at first I wanted to pursue art, but then my dad was like, get something a little bit more general that you like, something that could branch out to different places. And English just really encompasses so many different, it can point to so many different roads. And I feel like especially that major also can lead to that confusion because it points so many different directions.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, oh, well, which one do I go in? You know?
Yeah. Journalism was interesting because it's so general. I mean, you can have beats, but even within the journalism beat, you still have to learn a million things at once. And, you know, you can never really shut it off. It's just a valve that keeps feeding you information that is life affecting. You know, you learn a lot from it as you're doing it. I don't know. Maybe there's just something else kind of hiding in my brain, like a little bit of autopilot that did get me there and made me feel at home. I'm not a journalist anymore. I got out of it, but I'm still doing the same kind of work, you know, which is communications and advocacy, which again is pretty much what you're doing if you had to categorize it a certain way. You mentioned Tourette being elsewhere in your family. Do you know anybody else who has it besides, did you say your nephew?
Yeah, my nephew.
Tell me about that with your family.
You know, after my diagnosis, my parents were kind of at a back and forth, and they would kind of even joke at it at times. They would be like, "Oh, would it be from your side? Oh, no, it's from my side. We have this quirk." Or it was a conversation, but I feel like it wasn't really a serious one until my nephew was diagnosed with it, and then we started to. And my nephew's from my mom's side, so that's when we really started to kind of give her the side eye and be like, okay, so what's going on with the family? And you know, I'm not, there's no other diagnosis besides my nephew and I, with Tourette in the family. But, with any, I know that there's a couple of other diagnoses or diagnoses and within the family. And lately, you know, I feel like since my studies have been kind of circling around a lot of different disabilities and mental quirks and neurodiversities, that I started to really, I guess, analyze my mom a lot. Mm-hmm. And you know, I really can't say that there's any that I know of that were diagnosed, but yeah, I'm still in the process of keeping an eye on my mom's side of the family now.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you know, having one diagnosis is, I think, a really great thing when it comes to just setting, again, kind of putting a stake down and having a frame of reference within the family. Because if it does come up elsewhere, you know, oh, well, Calvin, you know, he was diagnosed with that. I mean, this might be what, you know, so-and-so has. It's and this is not me saying the diagnosis is the key to legitimacy with Tourette, because a lot of people have a difficult time accessing care and accessing a diagnosis, finding a doctor who's credible enough to give the diagnosis. But when it does come, I feel like it's really important for the future of other people in the same family, you know, because all of a sudden they don't have to go through the sense of mystery and like, what's wrong with me? And, you know, why am I doing this and all that? I mean, you kind of have a support system, and you know, you can be there for the other person who has been diagnosed. And that's another really great kind of powerful thing, because, you know, a lot of people don't have that sense of guidance, sometimes go through it alone. They don't have support within their family. And so, I mean, you just kind of end up being a beacon within your own family for anybody else who has anything that even kind of comes close to Tourette, you know, the comorbids of OCD, and there's the sleep issues and depression, anxiety, all that stuff. Do you also deal with these other things like anxiety, depression, sleep issues, things like that?
Oh yeah. You know, I actually started really addressing them recently. And especially in my undergrad, I didn't notice it, but I was in a very depressive state in my undergrad, and I suffer still from right now from a lot of social anxiety. I really
Hmm.
and that's actually intensified in recent years, and I'm not really quite sure why, but it's just to be able to get up and you know, go outside and be around a really social environment. I have to really like swallow this really big lump inside of me and like take a deep breath, and I don't know. It's interesting. And weirdly enough, in my teenage years, I also used to have really, really terrifying night terrors. I don't know if there's any
Mm.
connection with that, but I remember going to the doctor for that, and them saying that it was my brain still being active at nighttime or when I'm dreaming or whatever. A very scientific explanation, but you know, I like to connect. I like to think that, you know, since there's already some interesting stuff going on in my brain, that also may be something that's tied with it too.
Yeah. No, I feel you on the social anxiety part. I don't know if the quarantine or the lockdown or anything like that has been good for me. I do like, you know, I'm an introvert and I do like being by myself. I don't like big crowds of people. I don't like group activities. You know, I like hanging out with my friends, but you know, my battery dies pretty quickly. And as I was saying in the last episode of Tourette's podcast, like when I would go out to a social situation or see a band play or something like that, I would drive myself so I could make a quick exit if I needed to. And I wouldn't say bye to anybody. I would just kind of like, you know, I would disappear and go back home. And, you know, being here at my house, it's nice. It's me and two cats and a dog, and it's great. And so where I work, you know, it's an office building environment. And there have been talks about, you know, when we're all going to get back together. There's sort of excitement of like, you know, we need to get back into the office. And with me, I'm just very content being here. But I also know that I need to kind of police myself and force myself to get out and put myself in these situations for, I don't know, the practice of processing and being around people. Because, you know, socialization is really important. You know, if I lock myself away too much, then, you know, I don't think I necessarily create a manageable future for myself unless I just want to be a hermit forever. And I don't, you know, I really like people. I like working with people. Having the conversations on Tourette's podcast has been really great. It's been a really great way to kind of get through all this because I'm connecting with people. And, you know, we have like really, really similar stories, but you know, I still like the comfort of being here by myself. And when I do go out, even if it's just to the grocery store, I feel really uneasy and on my guard and kind of, I think, distrusting of people, which is something I really need to work on. Just, you know, anyone who looks at you in the eye, it's kind of like, why are they looking at me? You know? And
Yeah.
so I definitely just have this weird tension that I feel when I'm not inside my house. I can take walks by myself. That's beautiful. I love that. That's such a great feeling. Really mentally healthy for me. Walk around my my town, but I don't know. When I see other people, I get this edge, you know?
Yeah. You know, that was, you saying that really like brought me comfort because I 100% agree with all of that. I feel that to my heart because right now during this pandemic, like you said, a lot of people are doing the whole, oh, when we get back together this, when we get back together that. And I feel this sense of guilt within me because
Yeah.
like you said, I'm very comfortable here at my house. You know, I teach I do my instructional aid job virtually. I do my tutoring gigs virtually. I go to my school virtually. So everything has kind of been, I remember one of my close friends said, she was like, it's like you've been preparing for this. And I was like, I mean, I guess we could put it that way, and you know, like you said, I was just at Smart and Final, earlier and like you said, it's when I'm by myself, when I'm walking around, when I'm just staring at the mountains or whatever, I feel so light and okay. But as soon as other people come in my midst, it's like you said, this edge, just, I can't get myself to feel comfort. And I guess that's kind of started some quarrels within, I guess, my friendships and my family, especially because my mom loves to be around me and my mom's my best friend. So I love to be around her too. But like you said, my energy or my battery runs out very quick too. So, and I've noticed my dad's very similar. I'll see him go out and they'll be very active, 10, 15 minutes, but then he retreats and reloads and has his time. And that's very much how I am too. So, but yeah, I totally can feel you on that edge when people are around.
The Tourette Association of America is the premier nonprofit working to raise awareness, advance research, and provide ongoing support to those with Tourette Syndrome or tic disorder. With a network of over 130 chapters, support groups, and centers of excellence, the TAA engages with communities across the nation in an effort to provide tools, webinars, workshops, and support for all seeking assistance. As a primary sponsor of Tourette's podcast, the TAA supports the authentic conversations showcasing the diverse representation of the TS community. To learn more, visit Tourette.org. TOURETTE.org.
Yeah, guilt is the right word. I think that's what I was trying to come up with. Because you do kind of question yourself. It's like, am I a snob? Am I a bad person? Am I, do I have some like bad low tolerance for friendships, or like what is it? What's wrong with me? And I don't know what the answer is to that. I love my friends, love my family, love the people in my life are fantastic, but I definitely just kind of need, I don't know, small doses. That is something I do want to work on. I do want to get better about that, because sometimes being supportive is not necessarily just kind of being so inward all the time with me. Like I want to be supportive of my friends and the people I work with who've kind of put their neck out for me, make myself uncomfortable for somebody else's benefit. Like I feel like I need to do those things, but so guilt is definitely the right word. That's exactly what I was searching for.
I know it's I would always feel bad about it. And I would always kind of think to myself, I'm like, oh, those like Lord of the Rings type friendships where like Bilbo or Frodo are just in the Shire, and then Gandalf rolls in once every however many years, and they hug and they do their tea, and then they go off however long. And then at first I was like, oh, that sounds so right. But like you said, it's getting in that uncomfortable space for a friend. It's to be there for them and to be present for them is so important. And yeah. I've recently been trying to schedule virtual, but like Zoom movie nights with a lot of my close friends, and we each kind of have like so much fun right now. We just started Gossip Girl, which I've never seen in my life. But
I watched that entire series.
It's so good. Oh my gosh.
I'm not a TV person. And typically movies are too long for me. I like very short blast things, which YouTube is kind of perfect for me. But in the context of me not being a TV person or watching, I can't think of very many TV series that I've watched like start to finish, but I did watch that.
It's a juicy show. I'm on episode. I finished the first 2 episodes, and I'm already texting my friend. I'm like, we gotta start it up again, because I can't stop thinking about Blair and everyone and Serena. It's so good. Speaking of good shows, have you ever seen the show Buffy the Vampire Slayer by any chance?
I've seen maybe 4 episodes. I know some friends who were like, if there was like a festival, they would go to it. Like just really, really cult level obsessed with Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I've never really seen, I've seen like individual episodes just in the course of being here and there, but I've never really gotten to follow it.
Oh, I feel like part of my acceptance and my very relaxed diagnosis of Tourette when I found out was in part to me growing up watching that show. Cause I remember I was like, I don't know, 8, 9 years old watching it up until it's ended. And I remember it was they had very organic, LGBT relationships and very really beautiful redemption stories, and the whole show was about everyone appreciating everyone's differences and finding power in it and seeing how we can work together toward a common cause. And I remember just that blowing my mind away. And I guess now in my adulthood it might sound so silly, but I feel like whenever I have my close friends or I meet someone with a difference, I'm like, oh, that's very much like Willow, or oh, that's very Buffy, or I compare it to a character, and in my head, I guess I'm creating like this fantasy football Buffy team where I'm finding just these amazing people with these amazing qualities and just the way it creates this beautiful family away from home. It's awesome.
That's really cool that you use the word, I think relaxed, kind of. I have a really diverse group of friends in a way where on paper we wouldn't be friends. But but I think they have the same style of just kind of being relaxed. And, I guess the word tolerant is maybe kind of what I'm looking for, but not exactly. It's just, we appreciate each other, even though we are in a lot of ways really, really different. Politically or, just life experience or style, like the way I dress or something like that. And the way, certain other friends I have, we're not from the same cloth at all, but we get along really great. And I think after a while of getting along with people who seem to accept you, they really solidify, in your group of friends. And I got some friends who were, kind of, I guess, maybe kind of just like me in terms of like, the kind of music that we like, and people who are cut from the same cloth as me, stylistically, same kind of art and, whatever. But it's a nice appreciation to be able to have that, just to have like a diverse group of friends. And I think kind of in the same way where if you have an office environment and it's all the same kind of person, it's not going to be a very groundbreaking environment. You're not going to innovate because you're not going to be absorbing on a daily basis new things that you wouldn't have thought about yourself because of your mentality,
I totally agree, because I remember I was in my fraternity in my undergrad, and like you said, it was a lot of a very I guess like a more similar mindset. I guess I had never been around that large of a body of guys before, so I felt, I was like, oh, whoa. Yeah. Like, I remember I had gotten assigned my big bro in the Greek community, and we went out to eat, and we were kind of, in talking to each other about things. And he was like, what's going on? 'Cause he saw me ticking. I was like, oh, I have Tourette syndrome. And he was like, oh, okay. And then it kind of got quiet for a bit. And he was like, so you got any girlfriend? And I was like, oh, I'm gay. And he was like, oh, okay. so it was like, it was funny to see that, two things that my, some of my other friends that I had gathered from high school might have not battle lashed to, that it kind of gathered a little bit more attention than I thought coming into my college years.
Hey, let me know if this is too personal of a question, but have you had to explain your Tourette in the course of like a relationship or anything like that?
Oh no, I love that question. Yes, I have. Oh my goodness. There are only like 2 big relationships I've had in my life. And the first one was in high school, and I could like only remember the TV show type glamour of it, So I can't remember breaking the ice to him about my Tourette syndrome. He knew I had it, and he was so supportive of it. And my more recent one, yeah, I did explain it to him. Oh my goodness. I can't remember how that went either. Now thinking about that, I don't remember how it went. They must have responded fairly naturally. And it's interesting because I feel like, especially within the LGBT community, there's a lot of difference and so much variety that mentioning a difference kind of is like just another one in the penny jar, you know? So it's like,
right.
So I felt like maybe that's why I don't remember, because they were just like, oh, okay, you know? But yeah, that's what I remember about that.
But, and you also mentioned, did you mention cheering?
Yes.
Was that a big part of your coming of age and confidence and all that stuff?
Oh my gosh, totally. I loved cheerleading so much, and I didn't realize how much it opened me to this other world. I remember I got diagnosed with Tourette like in middle school sometime. I want to say 7th-ish grade, I want to say. And I joined cheer quite a few years after that, but it was my Tourette was still definitely something that I was managing, and it was intensifying, and all these different things. I was going through all these rotation of tics. And I remember kind of trying to think to myself, oh, you know, where am I going to find my niche? And I remember these two girls I had transferred from a private school to a public school, which was already a huge like culture shock for me, because it was very different, just the style of the way everyone went about. And
I did the same thing. I went from private to public right around that time.
Oh, nice. I feel like I remember feeling ashamed about it at the time, because my dad really wanted me to go to private, but I just my mind just wasn't there for it. I don't know how to say it. Public offered the variety and the diversity that I was looking for, economically, culturally, neurodiversity, or that's not even a word, but all on,
we'll count it,
right? On all spectrums. And I remember these two girls were going around on like my first week or so back at that public school, and they were looking for male cheerleaders. And I kind of, you know, looking back, I noticed that they were definitely going for the boys that were, you know, coming out as LGBT at the time. I remember it was like 2008 or 9 at the time. And it was picking up traction. More people were feeling just a bit more comfortable year after year was passing to say certain things. And I remember I said okay to going on the team. I didn't know what to expect of it, but I went on, and it blew my mind because these girls were so sweet. And then I remember going to the competition and seeing other boy cheerleaders, when that was something I wasn't familiar with seeing at the time. And then it was this little world inside of that was kind of a few steps forward in a world that was already kind of taking steps forward. And I appreciated that, because they were all so understanding of my Tourette's. There wasn't even a second guess about my sexuality with them, or an argument about it. It was like whatever was put on the plate of difference, they were like, okay, let's take it. Let's work with it. How could it make this routine pop? You know? So it's like, I appreciated that so much growing up.
That's so powerful to kind of go from a hesitant kind of judgmental room, walking into the next room, and all of a sudden it's the right group of people and they get you.
Yes.
And just how that must feel at that point. I mean, so I don't have, I guess with my story, it's not quite the same, because I was never, other than having Tourette, I was never really marginalized in any way, or never really, you know, I'm a shrimpy guy and that's about it. But like, so I was picked on for those things, but it's like when I was in private school, it was the same group of kids again, like year to year, you know, first grade, second grade, third grade. There might be a new student here and there, but mostly the same group of kids. And in one sense, it was good because they got to know me, you know, so my tics weren't like some new, you know, fascination thing to pick on again. They kind of got it out of their system in a way. At the same time, when you said the exposure of diversity, it was kind of a diverse classroom, but again, the same people. And once I got to public school and changed classes, it was a different group of kids in each class. And the school had, you know, like a couple thousand people versus, you know, just like 100 where I went to school before that. It was such an awakening because I didn't have to wear the Catholic school uniform anymore. Like I was in public school now, and I could wear my my Iron Maiden shirt, my Slayer t-shirt, and it was around the time too. I think just kind of being exposed to that and being allowed to be that, someone who's like kind of into like punk music and stuff like that. it really blew the doors off of that to where it's like, oh my God, this is like, I can run free with this stuff, be myself in a way that I couldn't before, practice being myself in a way that I couldn't before. And so I guess through that process, I was kind of sucked more into the world of like, underground music and art and, things that weren't the mainstream. I definitely found my niche and my group of friends who were there, who I could relate to in that regard and really, really be myself. And if I was different, it was something that was totally okay, because they were too. And their life led them to the same place that allowed us to hang out with each other and appreciate each other because, they had some other factor in their life that was misjudged or it could be messed with or picked on or something like that. So we all kind of ended up outside of the boat of mainstream thinking and mainstream music and stuff like that. We had our own kind of sidecar of interests. And it's such a cool supporting thing to be there. That sense of confidence that you can get from that, but also the validation of, your interests are not just you being weird and different, quote unquote. And once you're allowed to kind of like have that conversation and really practice it, just your identity gets solidified and you know how to talk about it better with people who don't quite understand it. And that you finally have that home base. I mean, that's really, really cool. So I imagine that there must have been, a exponentially more powerful feeling for you to kind of get into that environment to where things that might have been, and I hope I'm saying this fairly, insecurities kind of in the greater world, you have this sort of environment where it's completely okay. And it's not even a question, it's not even anything you have to worry about or think twice about. Just that had to be so powerful.
Oh, it was so refreshing. I remember my one of my last few days being at the private school. My patience was running so low there. There was like so many just little strikes after strikes that I was just like, this isn't for me here, And and I remember one time a close friend of mine had made me like this really cute bracelet, and it was like very colorful. Looks like it had a rainbow scheme, but there wasn't any connotation to it at the time. It was just a fun BFF bracelet. And I remember one of the faculty walked up to me, and this was a Catholic school, and he was like, "Oh, you can't wear that here." And I was like, why? It's just a bracelet. He was like, the beads could break and it could fall on the floor and someone could slip. And this was during the time when that trend was out where people were wearing those beaded like Jesus bracelets where it had like different pictures of the saints and this. And I was like, okay, why are you singling me out? I really knew why, but and so I remember I left that school. I transferred to my new school, and I remember just seeing just all these people. It was like jumping right into some Degrassi type of sitcom. And I remember I was looking and it was a rally and the cheerleaders performed. And I guess that's what also kind of put my eyes on the cheerleaders. They did this huge, epic performance. And I remember one of the songs was like Avril Lavigne, and they were doing this awesome dance to it. And there was flips and jumps and stunts and this. And I remember I was just in awe. I was so in shock by it. And then I remember the performance ended and I heard someone behind me. They were like, wow, the cheerleaders suck this year. And I was like, this is public school? All these people, these great performances that people belittle and have high expectations for. I want it all the time, And I mean, it came with its fair share of closed people and mean people, but there were so many people at that school that it came with a fair share of great ones too.
Yeah, this is not the right way to say it, but it's almost like the risk reward thing where, there can be some degree of exposure to put yourself in a position where you are where you want to be. And, there might be some turbulence on the negative side of it, but the positives that you feel when you are with a group of people who just love you for exactly what you are. And they motivate you to want to participate and create and express, that's so cool. It's kind of funny because, so we talked about Gossip Girl and how I don't watch much TV at all. I can't think of many TV series that I've watched like start to finish, but I did watch that Cheer documentary series.
Oh,
did you see that?
So good.
Yeah, it was great.
It definitely made me want to, it was funny because around the time that show came out, I was coaching for a couple of years a cheer team, which was definitely another endeavor. Coaching was a lot harder than just, being the athlete. But but it was such a learning experience too. But I remember when the show came out, I was just, I remember it. I felt like, just everything felt so cheer. I was just happy. I was like, yes, it's back. I feel it in my blood.
Yeah.
So it was a good one.
Yeah, it was great. It was really suspenseful. And also, the whole thing was like a human interest thing. It's like the cheerleading was almost like a backdrop for the fact that you're just watching people's lives unfold, and especially people who were different. And there was the one girl who's kind of like a rebel kind of girl, and she kind of stuck by herself and wasn't really, I guess, like part of that like social circle, but she was still like commanding it, like she was nailing it, and it was really good. And you could tell that's just like, that was her safe harbor and where she needed to be to feel confident and strong. And it's kind of funny how many like random weird intersections that we've had so far with this. I feel like I can like mention one more TV show that I've watched, and you know exactly where I'm coming from with it.
I'm so down. I'm so down to TV it up. I do love TV.
What's ahead for you? So there's the education piece. Is that really going to be the kind of dominant force in your life, or are there other directions that you want to go? Or
oh yeah, I definitely want to head straight into education and just try to get into the classroom as I don't want to say as quick as possible, because I like taking my time with my classes because I'm learning so much about things I'm so interested in. But my eyes are so set on just being in class with the kids, and I feel like in my early 20s I had like all of these dreams, like realistic ones, unrealistic ones, from like, I don't know, like there might have been a month I wanted to act, and a month I wanted to rap, and a month I wanted to, I don't even know, be a backup dancer for J-Lo or something. I don't know. But I remember now I have like this huge sense of, I guess, clarity, and it feels like I'm ready to just be like in the classroom around those kids with those differences, and also just trying to keep learning as much as I can about Tourette in as many different angles as I can, because it is right there in my field of study, and two, it's in my life, so I want to keep getting to know, aspects of me and on the sidebar of things, but really I want to try to really kick butt with teaching once that comes into play.
Well, I mean, Calvin, I really love the sense of command that you have with what you want to do and where you want to be. And I mean, we'll break it down. Could you, a lot of people listen to the podcast for companionship, and sometimes they run into a guest where I'll get emails all the time where it's like, you had this one guy on and he said this one thing, and I've never heard anybody say it quite the same way, but I think it all the time. And, it's like this like eureka moment of like, wow, like, that's the real way to thaw isolation for people who they don't have the secure position that they wish they had in life. They know it exists, but they may live in kind of like an isolated area, or aren't accepted at their school, and I just love the kind of example that you're setting. And a lot of it, does come with being in an environment where you have found the right kind of people who support you and make you feel good. But I mean, do you have any advice for people who, I mean, so far I feel like this whole episode's been advice, but someone who hasn't quite gotten there, they have their insecurity with Tourette, or they're looking for their sense of command, and finding where they feel at home. And I mean, does that bring anything to mind that you would tell anybody who isn't quite there yet?
Yeah. There was actually this quote I heard recently that really was something I felt really in my soul, that I was the kids that I tutor, we were going over this monolith of story writing called The Hero's Journey, and one of the quotes in it was oh my god, what was it? The treasure in the cave you fear holds the treasure you seek. And that really resonated with me, because just even little things like just maybe going to a party or talking to an old friend again, even something as small as that could make me feel so like, oh, I don't want to do that, I'm nervous, or I love being in my shell, I love being in my bubble, and I feel like I feel like going outside scares me to my bones, but I feel like it's okay to be scared. And I feel like, and another quote I heard, that bravery can't exist without fear. And that made me feel so much better. It's like, okay, I'm going out. I may be doing these things that terrify the heck out of me. I may be putting myself in situations to be laughed at or to be judged, but that's okay. And that's what makes someone brave, I guess, you know?
That does it for season 6 of Tourette's podcast. Calvin, thanks. That was a perfect way to close it out. Hope you thought so too. This is the end of season 6, but not the end of the discussion. Again, we've got a lot of stuff coming up, including the National Advocacy Day here in the US and the ongoing discussions in the Tourette's podcast discussion group. I'm going to take a chill break for a little bit, and then work begins on season 7, which will once again be brought to you by the Tourette Association of America, online at tourette.org, making things happen for us. They make the podcast possible. Amanda and Megan and Leo and the TAA crew in Bayside, Queens, New York, thanks for everything you do. Thanks also to Bandrew, Heather, Logan, Malcolm, Zach, Cody, and Angry Ducky, who round out the Geeks Rising podcast network, which has helped massively to bring Tourette's podcast to a more general listening audience. And the network, I'll say, has done a lot for Tourette awareness. Not just in carrying this podcast, but they're voting with their dollars as well. Geeks Rising, thank you so much. Sophia is our endlessly amazing admin at the Tourette's podcast discussion group on Facebook. Join up, hundreds and hundreds of people talking about the podcast and whatever else is on their minds. Amazing support and recreation group for and around the Tourette community. Elizabeth McDonald designed the Tourette's podcast logo that's been in effect for a couple seasons or so. Thank you so much, Elizabeth. And thank you for listening and sharing the podcast with people it might help. That's going to do it for a while. That's season 6. Tourette'sPodcast@gmail.com in the meantime, or the contact form at Tourette'sPodcast.com. And if you'd like to give individual support to the show and be named here as an executive producer like Brett Ahrens, like Sarah Swenson, like Jerry Gidner, like Ramona Genex, patreon.com/Tourette'sPodcast. Thanks, everybody. This is Ben.